we go. Episode number 5. We have Aaron Karp joining us from the famous Instagram account, LBI from above. We are finally putting a face to a name so that our listeners and our viewers on YouTube or on Spotify or Apple Podcast can get to know this local phenomena of an artist. If you have Instagram and you've searched Long Beach Island, you have certainly seen his absolutely breathtaking aerial photography throughout the seasons. His frozen scapes, his beachscapes all carry this wonderfully, almost cinematic quality in bringing our little island to life. So, Aaron, thank you for joining us today. And I think the focus, what we're going to do today, is kind of shed light on what it is to be a drone pilot, and more specifically, a drone photographer here on Long Beach Island. And we'll go through some of the regulations and some of, if you want to get into drones and places you might want to go. So without further ado, we'll dive through this.
Welcome to the phenom of drone photography on LBI, and rather famous person now, really. Seriously, just your stuff is taking off, and it's awesome, and does just paints a beautiful picture of the place that we all love. So how did you get started as a drone pilot? And you know, and in the photography industry, were you a photographer before you were a drone guy? Like, how's that work?
Well, first of all, thank you guys for inviting me on the podcast. I'll start by saying that I reject pretty much all the labels you just applied to me.
Well, we can add modesty if you'd like.
Yes.
Certainly not a way I would describe anything that I've done here. But the way I got started was mainly a COVID hobby. So I'd first bought a drone back in 2017, 2018, but was living in Brooklyn at the time, and there's really not a lot of opportunities to fly drones around there. They're broadly illegal to fly in New York City recreationally. In summer of 2020, and then the winter afterwards, when we found ourselves living down here full time, I started flying the drone really just from the backyard. I took some pictures of the bay frozen over that first winter of COVID, and didn't even have an Instagram account at that point. My wife actually posted the pictures that I'd taken on her account, and they got picked up by a few local accounts and local businesses who reshared them. I ended up getting a lot of encouragement from the Sink or Swim folks. Really encouraged me to do more of it. And I ended up teaching myself more about photography. I had some basic education in photography. I took a couple of classes in college, and but had never really spent any time doing drone photography in any serious way before that. So really shocking to me just how popular a lot of these photos became. It felt like the photos I took of the island in the winter were particularly viral.
Yeah, I'd say so.
I think if there's one thing I've learned, it's that people just absolutely love this island. It's such a deep part of their identity. And what people have latched onto the most about the pictures I've taken has been, this idea of seeing the island from a different perspective. Sometimes that means just in the literal sense of aerial photography. That's not something people get to experience of the island very often, but any sort of unusual or off-season type view, the frozen bay, the causeway, the lighthouse covered in snow, the beaches covered in snow, those had appeal broadly on the island, and then even outside the island. I found a lot of people in just New Jersey who are casually familiar with the island, still really got very attached to a lot of those photos.
I love it. So with all that being said, what kind of training or certifications do you have to undergo in order to become a drone pilot? Could you walk us through the process, or do you even need a license at all?
Yeah, so this is something that I learned about over the last few years myself. There's basically two categories of drone pilot. There's what the FAA calls recreational pilots, and then there's what they call commercial pilots. There's a very minimal amount of certification you need to be a recreational pilot. And the main limitation is that you can't sell if you're doing it for artistic purposes, you can't sell that. If you're doing it for other commercial purposes like real estate photography or to do some sort of visual analysis of a structure or other things that drones are common for, agriculture, for that you do need a commercial certification. The process of getting a commercial license is not terribly hard, but you do have to take a proctored exam. And I think the average person studies for it, maybe 5 to 10 hours or something like that. So it is a meaningful investment.
Yep.
I think, I can't remember what the application fee is, but I think it's maybe a couple $100s or something like that.
Right.
So there is some time and financial cost involved in it, but it's not prohibitive if it's a area anyone's interested in getting involved in.
So,
is it state regulated or the feds or?
It's all FAA.
FAA. So you are flying an aircraft in actuality.
Right.
So for those listening, if you see a drone flying, it is likely registered as an FAA aircraft. So if you damage an FAA aircraft, you will be liable to the highest extent.
Wow.
10 years in prison. So don't cast your fishing lines or try and knock down a drone because you'll be the one losing at the end of the day.
Wow. What are some of the key safety concerns that you have to keep in mind when you're flying a drone?
Yeah, great question. So drones have fast spinning rotors that can absolutely injure somebody if it gets too close to a person while it's operating. So even just taking off and landing, you need to make sure you keep a responsible distance away from the aircraft. When it's in the air, of course, you also want to keep far away from humans, from structures as well. The FAA has a very long list of best practices regarding safety. I won't go through all of them today, but the most important ones are don't fly over people, don't fly over moving vehicles. Although, most modern commercial drones, especially if you buy from a reputable company like DJI, who's the leader in consumer and prosumer drones, they're generally very reliable. You shouldn't expect one of your motors to just die at any moment in the air, but it can happen, and it has happened to people. If that drone crashes, you do not want it to fall from 300 feet up in the air onto a person or a moving vehicle. We're fortunate on LBI that there are large, wide open spaces, namely bodies of water, that we can fly over here. If you have your commercial license, you do get some additional privileges as far as transiting over a roadway or things like that as a recreational user, you're not allowed to do. Right.
So I guess specific regulations when it comes to Long Beach Island, especially if you're a commercial pilot and you do make it through that small barrier to entry of acquiring the license, what steps do you need to take if, say, you're flying for a realtor commercially? Yeah, so the process of getting approval to fly a mission, as they're called, which makes it sound a little more serious than it is. It is.
It does vary by township. So different towns and boroughs on the island have different restrictions. So Long Beach Township, which, as most of you guys know, covers a whole bunch of towns spread out over the island, has actually unusually strict drone laws for most municipalities in the U.S. The township requires that to fly a drone almost under any circumstances other than, I think, like a few feet high in your backyard, you need to have a commercial certification. You need to be registered with the Long Beach Township Police Department. And that before you undertake any mission, again, I'm kind of rolling my eyes when I say mission here, but you do need to call that into the police department at least 24 hours in advance. So if you're a real estate photographer shooting a property in Brant Beach, that's the process you have to follow. If you are operating in a different township, the requirements are generally lesser. So Ship Bottom, Surf City, Barnegat Light, for example, to the best of my knowledge, and I'm not a lawyer here, but to the best of my knowledge, do not have any ordinances on the books about registering with the local municipality. But you still need that commercial license in order to comply with FAA regulations because you're doing a commercial operation in real estate photography.
Cool. What are some of the most popular spots for people to fly a drone on LBI?
I can't speak for the masses. I can talk about the places that
you are the guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can tell you about my favorite places. So
okay.
I look for iconic locations, to kind of go back to the idea that people have very strong emotional attachments to the island, and that extends to the major landmarks on the island. The lighthouse, the causeway, Viking Village, those are some of the most historic and I think particularly sentimental large structures that or large areas that are sentimental to people. Of course, beaches are a natural feature as well.
There's something in particular where the lighthouse sits, and that is being in a New Jersey state park. So I've heard some hearsay about flyover state parks, but just to clarify for our listeners and watchers, what's the MO?
Yeah, very important to call this out. I have certainly been in Barnegat Light State Park and had drones buzz 20 feet over my head. And it's typically impossible to know who's actually flying it, unless you see someone with a remote control in their hands. But federal law, to the best of my knowledge, is that you can't fly drones in national parks, national forests, state parks, and state forests. So that includes Barnegat Light. It includes Holgate. Holgate, I should mention, is also part of Long Beach Township, so it comes with all of its other rules anyway. But Barnegat Light does not have the same ordinance as Long Beach Township. So when I fly there, I will launch from the parking lot
outside of the
park, the parking lot across the street from Kelly's.
So not on state land,
correct,
or at least state park.
Even though
land.
your device goes over the lighthouse.
So I won't. Nope. So I don't fly over the park or the lighthouse. So I will bring the drone from the parking lot into the air, then out over the water. And if you see
out
me
the inlet, fair game.
Yep, you see me posting photos. They're always from out over the bay, over the inlet, out over the ocean in Barnegat Light. But I never fly over the lighthouse, over the park. Part of that is, of course, abiding by the regulations and the laws here. At the same time, I know what it's like to be in the park and have drones are loud. They're annoying, right? I'm not gonna sugarcoat that. If one comes too close to you, it can mess up, your picnic or your nice stroll down, that jetty.
And it's a
walkway.
state park for a reason, because it happens to be a habitat to nesting birds, especially. And so by flying drones over a park like Barnegat Light State Park, we want to leave the wildlife the best we can, right?
Yep, so absolutely. You will see sometimes I've posted photos that are close-ups of the lighthouse. The reason I'm able to get those is because my drone has a 160 millimeter telephoto lens on it.
There you go.
So I can still say, keep the drone safely and responsibly and legally out over the water, and then zoom in a factor of roughly 7x to get those close-ups of the glass at the top of the lighthouse or things like that.
7x is sharp on those DJI Mavic 3s.
Wow.
Absolutely. With all this drone flying, can you share kind of a memorable experience? Now, obviously, people are not supposed to talk to pilots while they're flying, but inevitably in such a tight-knit community, people come outside to check and see what's going on and the noise about. Can you maybe elaborate on any memorable experiences you've had while flying or people you've met through flying drones?
I've certainly been approached plenty of times. If I'm out on the beach at sunrise, people will come and say, "Oh, are you flying a drone?" And it's, I'm always a little worried someone's going to say, "Oh, you're bothering me with the drone," but no one's ever actually said that to me. I think some of the more memorable experiences I've had have been just sort of related to the weather or the circumstances. I remember, I think it was that winter 2021 or 2021 to 2022. We had a couple of really big blizzards on the island. I think one in the beginning of January, one towards the end of January. The temperatures were down in the single digits, and the schools were closed for basically the full week because the roads were so icy. And I took my car, which is 4-wheel drive, and drove it at about 15 miles an hour down the boulevard to Beach Haven to take some photos down there on the beach. And I remember just feeling like I was going to lose my fingers while standing outside in about 5-degree weather, trying to get these photos. Eventually realized that I could sit in my car and the drone could still talk to the remote. So I think that's why I still have 10 fingers.
Yeah, not advised, but desperate times call for
There you
desperate
go.
measures.
Stay in the car. There's the hint there.
But the no risk, no reward, right? I mean, or no pain, no gain, or whatever the
Was it you
appropriate
got to
metaphor
risk
is
it
here.
to get the biscuit?
Heard that before.
But keep in mind, while flying a drone, you must maintain VLOS or visual line of sight. So if you are in your car, it better be parked on a nice veranda where you can see your aircraft at all times.
Yep. Good
So
point.
do you have any advice for aspiring drone people, pilots?
Yeah, I would say you don't need an expensive drone to get started. The entry level, especially, like maybe one generation older of DJI mini drones, take really wonderful pictures. I mean, they won't have a big zoom. They won't maybe do as well in very low light as some of the larger, more expensive drones. But for a few $100s, you can get a used DJI Mini 2 or a used Mini 3, something like that. For just a few $100s on eBay. It's not expensive to get started. The other advice I'd have is learn about photography. A photo from a drone, and I learned this myself, right? Just because it was taken from a drone doesn't make it a good photo. You really need to learn about the basic, art and science of photography and composition, framing, the basics of color, and I think my number one piece of advice is straighten the horizon.
Yes, please straighten the horizon.
Whether you take your picture with a phone or with a drone or a SLR or something like that, I feel like most of the pictures I see of beaches and sunsets on LBI have a horizon that's 10 degrees off flat.
So this goes for your family photos. This goes for everything. Keep the
every
horizon
single photo.
We have the same
completely
problem
flat.
with toilet bowls in real estate, so nothing ever seems to be straight. So
I want to thank Aaron for coming on today and giving us a short little insight as to his intel on flying drones on Long Beach Island and some safety regulations and some things that you can use to get into drone flying yourself. And I guess with all this procurement of fine art you've done, I got to ask before we go, is there anywhere you sell it, or is there, how can people get prints, art shows? What do you got?
I do sell prints of my work at lbifromabove.com, and you can buy small prints, cards for the holidays, large prints. You can get them framed all through the website, and 100% of profits from what I sell goes to local nonprofits. So I've, in the past couple of years, made donations to ALO, Alliance for Living Ocean, or one of the big local eco nonprofits. Have given money to the Hunger Foundation of Southern Ocean County, and I love the idea that this hobby, which is really what it is, can be a small force of good on the island and help keep the island beautiful and support the people who live here and around here.
well, thank you for your very inspiring visit and your good work serving the community aesthetically and from a charitable point of view. It's very impressive that we have people that think like you do and act like you do, and we're a better place for it because of people like you. So thank you again for coming. And Mike, where will we see you again?
Oh, we'll see you in the air. We'll see you on the beach.
We'll see you on the beach.
Thanks for coming, Aaron.
Thank you guys so much.